Hello everyone. I want to talk to you today about Jesus and his role in fulfilling the messianic prophecies. And I'm going to use the work of Professor Peter Stoner as my example for you. Now I'm talking about the late Professor Peter Stoner. He passed away in 1980. He was 91 years old. And I'm telling you this because if you go online to search for him, there is a second Professor Peter Stoner who will come up. I don't know if he's a professor, but a second Peter Stoner comes up. So don't confuse the two. This Peter Stoner was chairman of various departments of math and astronomy at a number of colleges throughout his career. Now, opinions vary, but it's generally agreed that there are about 109 prophecies in the Bible regarding the coming of the Messiah that were fulfilled by Jesus. And in 1952, Professor Stoner devised a project where he worked with 600 students from 12 different classes to investigate the probability that the man we know as Jesus of Nazareth could fulfill just 8 of the 109 prophecies. And it's worth noting that Stoner's results were reviewed by a panel of his peers to ensure that the methods he used and the results that he provided were accurate and reliable. And he ended up writing a book and publishing them in a book called Science Speaks. So what he did for 8 prophecies, messianic prophecies, is they worked out the mathematical odds, the statistical probability of Jesus fulfilling each prophecy and then adding the next prophecy and calculating, okay, now we're going to work on what are the odds of him fulfilling 2 and 3 and 4 to 8, with each one adding further restrictions and changing the probability. So for a very simple example, let's say, for example, you have a classroom of 40 children and you're looking to identify someone or maybe work out the odds that one child is going to fit 5 requirements. And so you say, okay, the first requirement is that of these 40 children, it must be a male. So, okay, we eliminate all the females in the classroom. The second requirement, he must have brown eyes. So we eliminate all the blue, green, violet-eyed children. The third requirement is that he must be born in the country. So that would have eliminated any children in the classroom who were born overseas. The fourth must be that he has to be left-handed. And so that would eliminate all the right-handed children. And the last might be that he has to have black hair, which would eliminate all other hair colors, red hair, blonde hair, brown hair. So can you see how each time you add a new requirement, you're making it harder for one child to meet all the criteria? And that's what Professor Stoner did. He said, if we continue to add a new prophecy, each time we do that, it makes it more difficult for Jesus to have been the one who fulfilled the messianic prophecies. And again, we're only working on fulfilling 8 in this project. Now I will discuss a couple more than 8, just because it'll come up in the chat. But in keeping with Stoner's project, I want to share the illustration he gave to show just how incredible it is that Jesus fulfilled only 8 of the prophecies. Now some of you may have heard of his famous Texas illustration. He said if you took 100 quadrillion silver dollars, and that's a 1 with 17 zeros after it. And of course, having been born in the late 1800s, they used silver dollars, which is why the example uses them. And he said you take one of those 100 quadrillion silver dollars and you put a mark on it. And then you mix the whole pile of them up and you cover the entire state of Texas, right up to the borders, with all these coins. And they would cover Texas to a depth of 2 feet or 60 centimeters. Then you blindfold a man and you tell him he can take as much time as he wants to walk around, but he can only pick up one coin of whatever coin he wants. And the odds of him picking up the marked coin are the same as the odds of Jesus fulfilling 8 prophecies. Then Stoner took it a step further, saying, okay, if we had 8 more prophecies, the odds of Jesus fulfilling 16 of the 109 prophecies become even more staggering. So he said again, imagine taking that single marked coin, but now we're going to mix it in what would be a 1 with 158 zeros after it. I mean, some of the numbers he came up with don't even have a name. There's no word for them. These were staggering numbers. And he said, so we're going to mix the coin in with this 1 with 158 zeros worth of coins, blindfold the man again, and give him one chance to pick up the marked coin. And that is the probability that Jesus would fulfill 16 of the prophecies. Now we're talking astronomical odds here. I mean, the staggering likelihood of anyone fulfilling just 8 or 16 is incredible. But Jesus filled all 109. And Stoner's results showed that it was virtually impossible for one man to have done that by any kind of random chance. So we'll just have a little peek at some of the prophecies and who made the prophecies and when they were made. And we'll start with the manner of his birth. Now, this prophecy was made by the prophet Isaiah, and he said, the Lord will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. Now, a bit earlier in the passage, Isaiah says, listen now, O house of David. So he's referring to the line of David from where the Messiah will come. This is who he's talking to. And if you're wondering why the prophet says he will be called Emmanuel, but we know him as Jesus, well, there's a simple explanation for that. You see, Emmanuel, yes, it is a name. People do call their sons Emmanuel, but it's also a title. And in this instance, the prophet is saying that the baby will have this title, Emmanuel, but that he will have the name Jesus. And Emmanuel means God with us, which is exactly who Jesus was. And we learn in Matthew chapter 1, verses 21 to 23, this is when Joseph was trying to wrap his mind around his betrothed being pregnant and knowing he wasn't responsible. And would not have been an easy time for him. And the angel of the Lord appears to him, explaining to Joseph what happened, that the Holy Spirit had overshadowed Mary, and saying, yes, she will have a son, and that you are to name him Jesus, or Yeshua. And something I find fascinating while we're talking about this is nobody can be certain, but there's a strong likelihood, and most scholars believe it, that the angel of the Lord is what is called a Christophany. And a Christophany is a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus. So it's his appearance before he came to earth as through Mary as the Messiah. And there are examples in the Bible where people think Christophanies occurred, and one that springs to mind is there's a mysterious high priest named Melchizedek, and he had no lineage, which of course you learn in the book of Matthew that the Jews are very big on lineages. There was no lineage for him. There's a lot of mystery around Melchizedek, and many people, I also believe it, think that Melchizedek was an example of a Christophany. So that's why we know he'll be called Emmanuel, but named Jesus. He also fulfilled the manner of his birth in another prophecy by being born in Bethlehem. And this is, again, another one that was given 700 years in advance by the prophet Micah, who says, But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me a ruler over Israel, whose origins are from old, from ancient times. So we're told that this ruler is pre-existing from ancient, he's always existed. And Ephrathah distinguishes the area because there were two Bethlehems in at the time. There was a larger Bethlehem in Galilee and a smaller one in Judea. And it's the smaller one that is known as Bethlehem Ephrathah. And by including the detail of which Bethlehem, it further narrows it down again, saying, not only will you be born in Bethlehem, but you'll be born in the little Bethlehem. An even older prophecy given way back in Genesis says that the Messiah will come from the tribe of Judah. And that prophecy was given 1800 years in advance. There's another one in Malachi, which is not one that Stoner included in his 8, but again, this is yet another one that fulfilled relative to Jesus' life. Malachi says, the prophecy says, I will prepare my messenger who will prepare the way before me. And of course we know that's John the Baptist. And again, what were the odds that John the Baptist was preparing the way for the man we know as Jesus of Nazareth? So that's another one, prophecy about Jesus. So far we have 700 years in advance of his birth. The manner and location of his birth were given by 2 prophets. More prophecies that were given to describe the death of the Messiah. We're told in Isaiah, Psalms, and Zechariah. They all tell us that he will be numbered with the transgressors. In other words, he will be lumped in with sinners, with criminals, which he was. And they say that he will be pierced for our transgressions, which he was. He had a sword jabbed into his side, and Luke confirmed that. And those were given 700 years in advance, and Jesus fulfilled those prophecies. And 1,000 years in advance, the psalmist provides even more precise detail that none of his bones will be broken. And you have to understand that crucifixion victims had their legs broken. And what's interesting too is crucifixion. We know he's going to be crucified, and yet crucifixion had not been invented for centuries. Like when these prophecies were made, it would be centuries before crucifixion was even invented as a form of punishment. And then the Romans absolutely perfected it. But it wasn't even a punishment back then. But the prophecy said that none of his bones would be broken, like the Passover lamb, which that's another story for another time, how he exactly fits the description of the Passover lamb. And the thing is, crucifixion victims had their legs broken to speed up their death, because they suffocated. And being stretched out like that, and a lot of them had been flogged first, so they were bleeding and everything as well. But they would push their feet up, like push up on their feet, to try and get more air in their lungs. And so the Roman soldiers would smash their legs so that they couldn't push themselves up. And then they couldn't breathe, and it would hasten their demise. And that happened to all of them. They just went around breaking their legs to hurry up, we got other people to do next. It's pretty barbaric. But Jesus, the prophecy said none of his bones would be broken. And when the Roman soldiers got to Jesus, they found he was already gone. So they didn't have to break his legs. But as the 3 different prophets said, he was pierced. They put a spear in his side to make sure he was, and blood and water gushed out, which Luke mentions. Of course, being a physician, he noted. And that's really interesting, because the detail of water, you would think they'd just say it was blood, but it was blood and water, which is exactly what would have happened. You would have had both come out. There's also 1,000 years prior in Psalm 22. See, the Psalms, I believe, were written over a period of many years. I think some might even have been written as far back as 3,500 years before Jesus. So I checked out when, this one is in Psalm 22, and I checked out when Psalm 22 was written, and that was around about 1,000 years before Christ. And that prophecy says people will gamble for his clothes. It says they divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garments. And all four Gospels confirm that this happened. And it's a really precise prophecy too, like I'm sure a lot of the dead did not have Roman guards hanging around gambling for their clothes at the foot of the cross. But it says this would happen, and it did. And like I said, all four Gospels confirmed that prophecy was fulfilled. 700 years in advance, Isaiah also wrote that the Messiah would be treated like the wicked, but buried in a tomb for the rich. And of course he was. He was crucified with thieves, which, a thief is a wicked person. And he was buried in a tomb for the rich. And this tomb came from Joseph of Arimathea. There was a very wealthy man named Joseph of Arimathea who became a follower of Christ. And he asked for permission to take when his body came down, he asked for permission to take him and bury him. And he had just had a new tomb dug out, like they did them in the sides of hills and mountains. And he had I don't know that you could call a tomb beautiful, but he had a really nice rich man's tomb that he obviously hadn't used yet because he was still alive. And that's where they lay Jesus. And he also provided really expensive linens to wrap Jesus in. So he had a rich man's burial, which was no less than Jesus deserved. But for a man with no earthly possessions, not that he deserved to die, of course, but I mean, he didn't deserve one of the less expensive communal tombs, or, he didn't deserve to be just sort of lumped in with anyone. So it's if you could call it a nice touch that he got a rich man's brand new tomb. But that's only a few of the prophecies from centuries in advance. But before I close, I'm going to tell you a few of the short-term prophecies Jesus made about himself. And when I say short-term, I mean prophecies that he made about himself that would happen soon after. Like very soon, not 700 years in it, they happened. He made these during what is known as Passion Week. And Passion Week is the final week of Christ's earthly ministry. It started with Palm Sunday, when he entered Jerusalem on a donkey colt, which, again, there's yet another prophecy that Stoner didn't include in his calculations. Zechariah said, "Behold, your king is coming, humble and mounted on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey." And that is exactly how he entered Jerusalem. So Passion Week started from Palm Sunday when he entered and went through the Last Supper, the crucifixion, death, and resurrection. So Jesus made short-term prophecies at that time about the things that would happen that week. One of them was during the Last Supper, Peter was asking Jesus, "Where are you going?" Because Jesus said, I must leave you. And he says, where I go, you cannot follow me now, but you will later. And Peter was crucified. He was crucified upside down. And Peter said, "Lord, why can I not follow you? I will lay down my life for you." And Jesus answers, "Will you? Will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me 3 times. And poor Peter, he must have been absolutely horrified and saying, "No way, I'm never going to do that." But of course, if Jesus said it, it's going to happen. And it did happen. And the first time was, what happened was when they arrested Jesus, they took him to the high priest's home for questioning. And so Peter kind of hovered around outside trying to find out what's going on. There was a lot of activity outside the high priest's home. There were servants and officers and all kinds of people. And there was a servant girl who recognized Peter. And she said, you're one of them. You were one of the guys that traveled with this guy, aren't you? And Peter said, no, you're mistaking me. It wasn't me. And he denied knowing Jesus. And I find it really interesting because I looked up, they didn't say a servant. They add the detail. I'm big on picking up details. They add the detail that the servant was a girl. And so I looked up what was the average age for a servant girl in those days. And they ranged from sort of 12 to 16. So you think Peter had always shown great courage. And even when, he went after Malchus, when he attacked Malchus, when they arrested Jesus, he was never a coward. And yet it's quite interesting that what is effectively a little girl frightened him. But he wouldn't have been in his right mind. He would have been pretty freaked out at what was happening, the turn of events. So anyway, he denied him to this girl. And then the second time, same night, a bystander recognized him. And some people think it's because when he spoke to the servant girl, Galileans had a very specific accent, and they think someone may have picked up his accent and then turned around when they heard the accent and recognized him and said, you're a Galilean, you travel with him. And again, Peter, no, it wasn't me. The last time was in the courtyard outside the high priest's home. There was a whole lot of servants and officers and all these people warming themselves around a charcoal fire. It says they were around a charcoal fire. And I just mentioned Malchus, the one that Peter chopped his ear off, and Jesus healed it. Well, didn't chop it off, but he sliced it bad. They think it was a relative of Malchus who recognized Peter from the arrest, and you wouldn't forget the guy who took a sword to you, to your relative. And he also said, you're one of the disciples, and Peter denied it. And then within a minute, the rooster crowed. And Peter must have just wanted to curl up and blow away because he realized, oh my gosh, he said that was going to happen, and it did. Jesus also prophesied that he would be betrayed by a friend. He said this at the Last Supper, and of course, it was Judas who betrayed him. He betrayed him for 30 pieces of silver, which was the cheapest price you could get a servant for, or a slave. I mean, a big, strong slave or servant would fetch a lot bigger price, a much higher price. So he not only paid the cheapest price, but he didn't even pay gold. He didn't even get paid gold. He sold Jesus out for the price of the cheapest old or somehow unfit servant, which is pretty awful. And Jesus also told the disciples that they would scatter when he died. And they did. They all went into hiding because they were all frightened, and you can't blame them really. Their rabbi was crucified, and they must have wondered, if the Romans will do that to our leader, then what's going to happen to us? So you can't blame them. They got scared. Some people might say they weren't very brave. Well, these were 11 men whose world had just been pulled out from under them. And they never expected him to end that way. And it wasn't until after the events and Jesus returned to the upper room in his resurrected body. He walked through the wall, through the door. Anyway, it says the doors were all locked and he just appeared there. So he either just sort of materialized or walked through something. And it wasn't until then that all the pieces started falling into place. So prior to Passion Week, they probably thought that Jesus was describing an earthly kingdom that he had come to bring. That's when the penny started to drop, and they thought, okay, and from then on they started working things out. So you can't blame them, because nothing like that had ever happened before and has never happened since. And if they were ever afraid again after that, they certainly never showed it. In fact, all but one of them, John of Patmos, all the other 11 disciples were martyred because they replaced Judas with another one. And I can explain that another time, how that happened. John was the brother of James, the two sons of Zebedee. And his brother James was the first martyr, the first one to be martyred. So he sees his brother die, then the other 10 die. To say he wasn't martyred, it kind of minimizes what he did have to go through. And he lived there till he was a very old man. They estimate his age when he got the revelation where Jesus appeared to him in the cave in Patmos. They think he was probably around in his 90s when Jesus gave him the revelation, which became the book, the Revelation. But anyway, he never denied Jesus through all of it. And may we never deny Jesus either. So, in summary, the odds that Jesus could even fulfill 8 prophecies out of 109 are just so astronomical that he could only have been the Messiah. He had to have been, because it was impossible for anyone else to. And he fulfilled every single one of them to the letter. And as Professor Stoner concluded, it's impossible that this happened by chance, or that anyone else could have just by chance done it. And the whole purpose of Jesus' coming was for us, for you, for me, for all of us. That's the whole purpose of him fulfilling every prophecy and coming to earth. And I think you can't argue. If the prophecies say the man who fulfills this is the Messiah, we can't deny that Jesus was the Messiah. So I'll say a prayer, as I do, and that'll be the end of it for this talk. Loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for the Bible, and the fact that a third of it is prophecy, which of course is history in advance. We thank that you gave us all this history in advance to show us so that we would know it was true. Like Jesus said when he gave his short-term prophecies in the upper room, he said, I tell you these things in advance so that when they happen, you will know they were true. And we thank you for the prophecies that show us the Bible is true. Every prophecy that has been fulfilled so far in the Bible, not just the ones about Jesus, but even historical information, has all been true. And every fulfilled prophecy has been fulfilled 100%. There's only a couple left, we know. There are only a couple left for Jesus to fulfill, and he will fulfill them when he comes again, which he will. And I think that'll be sooner rather than later. And for this reason, and the 100% accuracy of prophecy fulfillment, we know, Lord, that we can trust the whole book. We thank you that Jesus left heaven for about 33 years to come and walk among us, to show your love. And of all the religions in the world, I thank you that we have a God who left his position of glory to walk among us, so we could see who you are and what you are like and how much you love us. And that you did all of this to show us that you are the only true God, and that Jesus is the only Son of the only living God. And we thank you for that. I pray, O Lord, that any listener who doubts whether you would love them or worry that they might have sinned too much, committed too many sins, and we're not talking about mistakes. You didn't come to forgive mistakes, you came to forgive sins. I pray that anyone who worries they might have just done too much wrong and be too far gone to be forgiven, that they will know that you came for them too. And if they want forgiveness, you will forgive them. They need only admit their sins to you privately. Nobody else has to know. And turn to you and say, Lord, just help me to know you. If they don't know you, just all they have to do is ask. And that they only have to come as they are. They don't have to do anything special. It's like they say, you don't take a shower before you take a bath. They don't have to clean themselves up. They just, as they are. They don't even have to go to church. They could do it in their own home, on a walk in the garden, in the park, anywhere. Just turn to you. They don't have to clean themselves up. They just have to trust you, that you love them, and that you want a relationship with them. I pray that anyone listening who worries knows this and talks to you. I thank you again for all the prophecies in the Bible and for the Messiah coming to save us. In his holy, precious name I pray. Amen. Until next time, God bless.